Kevin, thank you for agreeing to be a changemaker guest speaker in our podcast series. Perhaps you can start off by sharing your entrepreneurial journey because you're someone who was entrepreneurial very early in life.
I think looking at what's life on the other side of the fence. The greener pastures always attract us, and you see people being successful, and that kind of brings me to, can I have best of both worlds? Is there such a thing called a steady income, yet at the same time looking at taking some risks? And what can my investments bring me in that sense, as a multiplier, so to speak? Being corporate, yet at the same time entrepreneurial. Yes, like you said, started at a very young age. And when I was a kid, my dad would be asking me things like, if you want something, what are you going to do about it? What's the trade-off? What's the opportunity cost? Are you foregoing for a desire or want? And that got me started in thinking about where is the balance between a steady income and a potential windfall.
Wonderful. So, can you share with us how you had gone to Australia and how you were trying to augment your allowance and what you did?
Well, I went to Australia to further my studies. Like my sisters and I, we all had a different perspective in life. Although all of us were trained in school in totally different things, and when we decided to seek out our passions, I think that is one of the things that requires an entrepreneur to do. At that young age, taking chances, taking risks, but at the same time being responsible for it. I think that's important. Taught me to be self-sufficient, be independent, but at the same time, I think that's important, is to be responsible for my own decisions and actions.
Great. But now, if I can just ask you to share that particular entrepreneurial project that you did and how you were raking in the money. If I remember correctly, you were doing posters for a Chinese restaurant.
So, well, yeah.
It's a great story. And when was this? In the 90s?
In the early 90s, it was chance. And me being Singaporean, we are very bilingual, and there were opportunities there. Came out with a simple poster for ANZ Bank in the region because they had a lot of Chinese migrants coming in, but nobody knew that particular branch had Chinese-speaking staff. And my late cousin was one of the branch managers, and she said, can you come out with a simple poster and says, we have Chinese-speaking staff in this branch. Please come in. And that's I started doing one poster. The next thing I knew, I had to come out with 14 posters, and that made decent money. And of course, with Chinese migrants, they were probably opening up restaurants and stuff like that. One thing led to another. They said, I need you to translate my Chinese menu into English, because most of the customers were Australians, right, who couldn't read Chinese menus. So I started doing that. And the next thing led to printing of takeaway menus. I don't know whether that's entrepreneurial or...
Of course it is.
Well, I don't know. I think it's also the opportunity that came, and I subscribe to the definition of luck, where luck is actually when opportunity meets readiness and preparedness. So if I didn't have the skill sets and I wasn't there at the right time, the opportunity might come and pass me by.
Correct. And you've described that whole entrepreneurial journey. You've been very modest about that particular journey. But I think it's an outstanding example of how someone engages their entrepreneurial mindset to create something of value in the real world. So thank you for sharing what you did probably as a 19, 20-year-old. How old were you then?
20, 21 years old.
Yeah. I read a research somewhere that if you don't get started on entrepreneurial projects by the time you're 21, you're not really going to start and run a business, but you could be entrepreneurial throughout your life. And in this podcast, I wanted to make the distinction for people between being entrepreneurial or having an entrepreneurship mindset from being an entrepreneur? Because it's not as important to start and run a business as much as it is to have this open, risk-taking, inquiring, pursue your passion, being clear about the trade-offs and the opportunity cost, just as you described it, because we live in a world of disruption. And I think this new world requires new kinds of skill set. Do you have any thoughts about it?
I agree that we don't need to be an entrepreneur to have entrepreneurial mindset. I think that is important. It sounds like I'm very pro-government. We need corporate entrepreneurs, we need technopreneurs and stuff like that. But having said that, you're right that first and foremost, if you don't start that at an early young age, you play it safe all your life, I'm not sure when you're older, when you are settled in with your lifestyle, you would ever take those chances. Because circumstances, your liabilities go up, you've got more dependence. And I think that's where it holds you back. You may still be entrepreneurial, but your circumstances may not allow you to be entrepreneurial, or that it's holding your risk-taking or your risk appetite because of your circumstance, which has changed. Having said that, I think being entrepreneurial is probably too overused. I think it is about a risk-taking mindset, but having a clear mind of what you want to achieve and going ahead to do it is something which I think even managers in corporate ladders should embark on.
Wonderful. So I can hear from your story that your father provided the extrinsic motivation, but then there was that innate curiosity within you, which actually had these two things meet. And then you started to look at the choices that you could make as someone who's pursuing opportunities. Kevin, you've had an interesting life as far as an entrepreneurial journey is concerned, because from exploring it for yourself, you then subsequently worked in a corporate, and you were someone who brought on new ideas within the organization and worked on innovation in the tourism sector. And then you became an investor, and now you're a mentor to the third generation in the family business that you're involved with. So take us through this journey.
Wow, I don't know where to start.
Well, start with what you did at Sentosa and how that opportunity came by, or the place where you pivoted to becoming well-known in theme parks.
I must say one thing first. And having zero experience in tourism and technically zero experience in marketing, having studied it, but doesn't mean I've practiced it. And my ex-boss then, Mr. Daryl Metzger, the CEO of Sentosa, and then the COO then, Jerry Goh, took a chance on me and said, you know what, we've got several rounds of discussions and so-called interviews, and they said, I think you can do the job. I need to rebuild a sales and marketing team there, a commercial team. One of the things I went into Sentosa and I asked a few things. Was really a very important step for me. And I asked a few very close friends for advice, and they said a few things. And one of them said this: before you join them, Sentosa has been there. When you leave, Sentosa is not going to crumble and fall. What are you trying to achieve there? And of course, I had a whole long list of stuff that I wanted to do. Carry the trophy, carry the medal, right? And stuff like that. I think what's important was this advice a friend of mine gave me. His name is Vincent Ayatori. He said this: people will only remember how you make them feel and how friendships are forged out of this. This is the opportunity to widen a circle of influences in your life, and not so much on your achievements. And being a friend is a good achievement, right? Being a good boss is a good achievement. And I think I set out to do that. 20 years has passed since I joined Sentosa. I'd say most of my teammates then and now are still my friends, and we're still in connection with each other. And that helped me also a lot in my tourism consulting. Yes, there were things that I was able to achieve. I think I've been very blessed with that, but I couldn't have done it without a team. So I focus a lot on building a team as much as taking risks. But I went in there also with another mindset. I had a theory, so to speak. and said that what if a marketing person has zero job insecurity? Would he make decisions for himself or to protect himself, or will he do what he think was right? With that mindset, it drove me to make decisions and things that at that moment that were very unpopular, and even my bosses didn't agree with me. Sometimes I could have even lost my job because of that, but I felt that it was right for the company and for the destination Sentosa. And I did them. There were a couple of times it failed and I had to suck it up and literally swallow my pride and admit defeat and own up that I did something foolish. I think that shapes a lot of what I'm doing right now. Believing in a cause, but knowing, being able to see that there is that potential upside and willing to take a risk for it. So that I think shaped a lot of my activities, decisions, and plans. At the same time, I knew that I can work 24 hours a day, but still not achieve anything. So I wanted my team to flourish, to go out there and multiply for the Sentosa. And I spent quite a fair bit of time grooming, maybe whipping, and then some of them still hate me for doing that, for kicking their asses. And so I think that combination kind of shapes what I am right now. But having said that, moving into the entrepreneurial side, in 2006, when I left Sentosa, I decided that I think I want to venture out and be a consultant and try it out, right? I think Sentosa has given me a springboard, a launch pad for that, and has become my trophy in that sense. And I'm very, very thankful of that opportunity. And for two gentlemen who really took a lot of risk in getting a freshie to come into the job, Daryl and Jerry, I will be eternally grateful to them. And so I think that's where I thought I'll venture out. And one thing led to another. I think I've never even had the chance or opportunity to even print a brochure for myself. Or even I put up a website and I think I'm getting so many leads that I think I got to take it down because there are too many people calling me. And more than half the time, I'm saying no to projects. So I think I've been very blessed and very thankful for that. And at the same time, with that same attitude that I had on Sentosa, that I'm taking risks, but I'm very focused on results for the company and not for myself. I was able to also achieve for my clients. I think that's something, and that helps to bring on success and build a reputation. But then, of course, the reputation has a downside. The downside is, I always say this, that between my brain and my mouth is only about 3 inches. So it's very difficult to put a filter there. So I speak my mind. And as a consultant, I think that's what bosses want to hear too. They themselves, as bosses and entrepreneurs, they're surrounded by a lot of people who have a lot of job insecurity. They're in the hierarchy. There's a lot of things they can say, they cannot say. Yes, there's job insecurity as well. But as a consultant, I sit outside the hierarchy. And Ramesh, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Because I'm outside the hierarchy, I'm sorry, my job is actually to tell you what I think will go wrong, not just what will go right. And I think bosses need to hear that too. Sometimes they need to hear, you know what, Chairman, your idea sucks big time. It ain't going to work. And they need that reality check. So with that, the entrepreneurial mindset is also not just about taking risks for what can be upside, but also having a clear vision to know what is something that might terminally affect you or affect you terminally. So that I think is important. As a consultant's role, we need to be equitable on both the good and the bad things. We need to have that foresight for our clients, and that's what they pay us for. Not just to do things, but to have that foresight. And having said that, I think in the family business, yes, to some extent, I'm mentoring the third generation. I'm helping them out, and that's my role. I think that helps also, and it suits my character perfectly because I'm no holds barred in that sense. So I think that shapes a lot of my thinking right now. And with that, as an investor as well. But I do have one very simple philosophy or principle. I do not invest in what I consult, and I do not consult in what I invest.
Oh, that's a lovely one. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
As a consultant, you're always playing the devil's advocate, and you don't have the feeling of spending your own money. And
Yeah.
these are not my people. I'm sorry, when I go into my client's place, you're not my friend, you're my client. There is a business transaction here. I'm here to do a specific job. But as an investor, you build relationship with the company and the people. Your decision making will be quite warped. And both as a consultant, the decisions that you recommend are very different from the decisions that you make as an investor or a manager of a company. And the two should not be mixed into the same melting pot, because it becomes very convoluted.
Yes, that's right. So what I'm hearing is that you're talking about keeping an arm's length so that you don't put yourself in a conflict situation whereby you can't stay true to what you need to do, which is essentially take risks for results for the company or the investment, but not necessarily for you. And then if you were involved on both sides of the fence, this becomes a dilemma of sorts.
Because an ethical dilemma, definitely.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage to actually say that and practice it, because a lot of people, especially in today's world, with the crazy valuations and IPOs that you're seeing, people are just crossing site from being an investor to consulting to being an investor, because the opportunities are just abound. There are just too many opportunities to pass up.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Kevin, I want to sort of do a deep dive to understand a little bit more about your role as a mentor in the family business, specifically in terms of how you have engaged with the next generation. You're sort of setting milestones for them to do succession plan. You're creating for them the confidence of being the next generation who can take the original family business to the next level itself, as well as you're building trust between the different parties who are possible successors, so that it doesn't really matter who becomes the leader, because all the rest have also been developed and the next generation are equally successful.
As much as I try to guide them, it's also a group decision. I need to specify that.
But you had the buy-in from the board, the older
Well,
generation.
yeah, yes. Let's put it this way. This is not just my family business, but I think it happens to every family business, especially when it gets past the first generation. The second generation is still okay. Why? Because between the first generation and second generation, the second generation would have grown up together. They were at the same dining table. They were living in the same house in the first place because they're brothers and sisters. Then when it comes to the third generation, the brothers and sisters have their own families and they live in separate houses. The third generation hardly play together. They're called cousins. And the temperament, the character, and the upbringing will start to change. But at the same time, when the third generation and the fourth generation starts coming into the business, there will be an exponential growth of number of people coming into the business. But there is no exponential growth in the business to share. I think that's where many businesses, family businesses on the third and fourth generation becomes an issue. That's my theory, and I'm thinking that first, they are not as intimately connected with each other than before. Second is because of that, they may have different upbringing styles of management and interests altogether. And the very important issue would also be the business did not grow exponentially to feed more the exponential number of people coming into the business. Hence, it's likely to break down. There will be comparisons between siblings, children, and that's where we will have issues. So the idea here is to have the third generation come on board with new business development ideas to grow that rice bowl first. And that actually hones in their entrepreneurial skills or entrepreneurial mindset. Because we must not forget that what brought the first generation to the second generation is entrepreneurship. Whether the circumstances what forced you to be an entrepreneur, that's besides the point. The fact that you took risks and invested something, borrowed money to start something is very important. And because the patriarch or matriarch every day having lunch, dinner, breakfast with the with the second generation, that kind of rubs off to them. The third generation, some of them could probably more scholarly, probably because life's better. They didn't have hardships, for example. So I think at the early onset of them coming into the business, they need to learn how to grow the business, but they also need to know that they need to make decisions, as much as also stick to the knitting of collective decision making. And I think that is also a major issue in family businesses. We make decisions based on relationships, based on gut feel, more than based on professional and independent outlook in many things. So I think that is how we have embarked on for the third generation, to grow the business when they come in and let them be emperors and kings of their own little kingdoms, but at the same time, give them opportunities to sharpen their entrepreneurial skills and mindset, and develop trophies for themselves. That, I think, is a very important aspect, so that the entrepreneurial mindset prevails, and not forget that that was what made us successful as an SME.
Yes, that's right. You've done a great job in actually describing the creative tensions of onboarding, especially the third and fourth generation, because it's spot on. The first piece is that whole shared history, interaction, and ties, which is limited for this group of people because they're now in their own nuclear families as a cousin consortium or even children of the cousins. And the second piece is that, on the other hand, the business has gone through a life stage itself. It's at a mature stage, the original business. And so there is a need to now bring in new opportunities so that, you know, the pie is growing, as you aptly described it. And then the third piece is, if these grandchildren of the founders didn't have the same opportunity that the children had to sit at the dining table and to be exposed to all these entrepreneurial ideas as well as strategies, then how do they learn if they're not given a safe chance to test out their ideas and also allowed to take those risks and maybe even fail? Because many people say that only when you fail or only when you say no can you actually see the value of a yes and see the actual reason why you succeeded. Thank you so much for making it so simple for our audience to understand it. Is there anything else that you might want to say in terms of an advice to SMEs who are looking at this space, or in terms of succession planning? What could be an ideal way in which the founders or the second generation can look at this?
Complacency kills entrepreneurship. I studied finance. It's quite interesting. We've got a saying in finance that what made you successful today is not what will continue to do so into the future. Yes, in terms of activities and business models, that's where I think the entrepreneur patriarch, for example, he was never satisfied with how he's doing things. He's always bombarded by competition, price wars, and fluctuations in supply chain or whatever it might be. And he was always seeking out new ways. And that is the fundamental of SME entrepreneurship mindset. Never being satisfied with what you have, always asking, is there a better way to do things? Is there a better business I should go out for? What else can I do with my $100,000 other than keeping it in a bank or investing in the same business? How can I grow my business? How can I diversify from this particular risk? Complacency is that important thing that stops us from exercising risk-taking.
Wow. How can people develop a skill which keeps them open and curious and willing to test out new ideas, because in some ways, when you live in a country like Singapore, where everything has been planned for, everything has been thought out, how do entrepreneurs actually go out there and seek new opportunities? I don't work in Singapore. I work largely with ASEAN countries, and I find them to be very open and very entrepreneurial. In the limited interactions that I've had with Singaporean entrepreneurs, I found them to be very driven by what the government is saying as the key message, or the grants that they are getting to invest in digitalization, or the PIC grant, or even now you have a grant to hire new people. But then it's not directed internally from them seeking the opportunity. So what do you think about that?
I'll share with you what I said to many people in the tourism business for the past 1.5 years. If you need to wait for the GSS, government grant and handouts to stay profitable, I think you should give up becoming an entrepreneur. And that goes against risk-taking. If you need that grant to break even and make money, I think there's a serious problem in your business model in the first place, because you have not fixed the business model of whether it's elastic costs, and with zero income, you should actually be going into hibernation mode. I'm sorry. And that's what I've been telling many tourism businesses since March last year, 2020. And I agree that in many cases in Singapore, many of our entrepreneurs are looking for an end game with government grants or some special IPO buyout spec or whatever, right? To get your multiples of 30x, 50x or whatever X. And I think that's where we have a serious problem, because we are fixated with things like this, rather than I have a great idea and I believe there's a market out there. So I think that's the part which I talked about complacency. Jumping in the deep end, making sure that you don't dull your senses and dull your antennas, but rather lengthen them, feel it, be more sensitive. That, I think, is a very important part of not being complacent, always trying.
Yes. And it's not like relating to your life as destination, but really it's a journey. And that you're constantly learning and trying out new things, and that's an important trait to develop.
Yes, that's where I think many entrepreneurs need to remind themselves that was their secret to success before they arrived. The problem is when they arrived, what happened? They forgot how they arrived.
They sort of became comfortable and built their mansion.
And get their Rolls Royces, get their drivers, and 25 maids. Life became easy.
But you're actually pointing to something very interesting here. And it's got to do with our own self-actualization as human beings. Because if you look at our journey, there is a time when what we achieved was measured in tangible form, especially in financial ways. Then as we grew older, the opportunity to be engaged from the ability to pass on your learning, or your ability to still demonstrate that you can go in and do something as what you had done before is important. People are talking about ageism these days, and maybe I have another 10 years before I sort of get into that struggle for myself, whereby I become a digit in terms of how old I am, and not the kind of value or the contribution I could make, or the skill sets or the experience that I have. So what do you think about throwing away this wealth of knowledge from experienced people? And we're saying they retire and be at home when they can contribute a lot, even in this new world.
Yes, comes back to the word complacency. But if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, at the right at the bottom is physiological needs and safety needs, right? That's very tangible. And as you move up, become social self-esteem, you find that beyond tangible quantitative needs, it starts becoming more and more qualitative, intangible. But it's about people around you. But right at the top, when we talk about self-actualization, it's no longer about these things. You'll find that at that moment, right, of enlightenment, achieving your nirvana, it's really about you and your maker and what is life after death. Yes, it sounds morbid. It sounds really morbid, but I think it is about finding a deeper self. So entrepreneurs, again, we're driven by the quantitative. You look carefully at how that mirrors this whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? As an entrepreneur at the age of 20, 25 years old, he starts his business, he drives for big money, materialism. It's all very, very quantitative, very tangible. Once he reaches a certain stage, it's about recognition. It's about the size of his car and the size of his house. What does he wear? Where does he go for his holidays? Which part of the aeroplane does he travel in? Front part or the back part? Then what is the back tag on your luggage? Do you have a PPS on it or PPS? No, I'm a solitaire. Then suddenly to this point, we kind of continue in this, but we never reach self-actualization. We're always at the self-esteem. Why? I think it is about not being focused on what we need, rather than we are very focused on what we want. And they forget that what brought them to where they are is about this whole issue of never being satisfied.
Super. I'm going to move to a next conversation. Kevin, what was that key crisis that you dealt with? And is there that one thing that you wish you did differently about that?
I've got two crises. One was at a very young age, I got into an accident and they kind of opened up my skull and I had hemorrhage and then I got 42 stitches. I had 42 stitches on my head. I went through 4 surgeries on my head and every school holiday, I literally had to go back to Tan Tock Seng Hospital. And I probably would have lost my life if not for a surgeon by the name, he's dead actually, sorry, Dr. Gopal Bharatam, who saved my life. One is, yes, it's a personal crisis, but because during that time, this was in the early 80s, there was only one neurosurgery ward in the whole of Singapore at Tan Tock Seng Ward 33. And it's a common ward. I saw death. I saw death right in front of me. I saw people coming in with all kinds of neuro issues. It could come from fights. It could be from whatever. And that really opened up my eyes. I got very close to death. I saw death around me.
How old were you?
I was like 13 years old. It was from an accident. Of course, I tell all the girls it came from a fight. Okay, it sounds more it sounds a lot more heroic. Okay, and sexy. Okay, more glamorous. But of course, it's just a bicycle accident. Anyway, that's the truth. So yes, I think in that crisis, I pulled through. But that also made me look at life very differently.
Of course. Facing death at that age. 13.
Yes. Correct. Right. And not just for myself. At that moment, actually, you don't realize death for yourself because at 13 years old, you don't know what is life and death. But you saw death around you. And like I said, for that 1 year, I went to the hospital 4 times for my surgery. I would go back and stay there for a week or even 10 days and come out. So I could see also people who are still in the ward and people who have gone and left us. And the nurses are still there. They will tell me, the guy who used to sleep next to you, sadly, he had to go. So it was very, very traumatic in that sense. That's one. That changed my outlook in life tremendously. Then about 10, 11 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And it was very aggressive. And at that moment, I think I was opening a restaurant. And at the same time, I was managing a regional company for a Japanese company. All these things coming at the same time. I don't know what pulled through. I was blessed with a lot of strength and a lot of focus to ensure that daytime I go to work, get my daughter to school, hop over to the hospital, look at my wife being okay, then come back to office, get things done, evening, go back and see her, and just went on and on for a month or so. That was a personal crisis, a family crisis. Yes. But it also made me realize that with focus, with resolution, you can get things done. I could have chosen to go to the coffee shop and mope about everything. I could have done that. I could have gone there and say, why me? Why this? Why that? I think I didn't have time to even think about that. And I had a very supportive boss then in the Japanese company. His name is Mr. Takenaka. I respect him tremendously for that. And he gave me a lot of support.
It's really interesting. You flagged out three words, how you were able to navigate that crisis because you brought focus, you were able to tap into your inner strength and sort of like be resolute to get the things that you needed to do and handle in your life, because life goes on, whether it's the job or looking after your daughter, in spite of that other crisis that you had to deal with. Now, if you look back, how did you develop those skills? How did you develop those traits? Was it from that experience that you had in facing death at 13 and having those four surgeries? Is that what you actually developed at that point?
I don't think that it is one particular activity or incident or event that shapes a person. I do meditation every day, about 7 hours. It's called sleep. I spend a lot of time thinking, and especially Sundays. Sundays are my thinking time. And it's not so much on for myself, but really about putting on the rear view mirror and say, last week, what has happened? Why couldn't I achieve certain things that I wanted to do? And say, no, let's put that on the priority list and get it done. And I've been doing that for many years and thinking about that. That's one. Second thing is people will ask me certain questions and I always state that I'm the most stupid guy in this room. But I want you to know one thing, I'm the most hardworking guy here. So in that sense, I'm not complacent with what I have and what I know. I'm always thinking that I need to be more hardworking. Number two, tries harder. And I think that is an attitude that I've had for a long time. So to say that a particular event that has shaped me in that focus, I think it is this constant retrospective look of and kind of analyzing and evaluating what I've gone wrong, how can I have done it right, is a constant thing. In Singapore, there's a word for it. The word is paranoia, but in Singapore, it's called kiasu lah.
Or it could be just self-reflection, which is an awesome habit to have because you do it spot on every week. And you get to auto adjust whatever that you need to focus on. And it's a timely feedback.
My wife calls me a planner. I plan for things that hopefully doesn't happen. I plan for things that may not happen and the worst might happen. And I am very risk adverse. You'll be surprised. I'm very risk adverse. I'm very uncertainty adverse or avoidance person. I hate uncertainty. I hate changes in plans. So my only way of dealing with surprises is to anticipate surprises and plan for them. Because if I plan for the surprises, it's no longer a surprise, it's anticipation.
That's right. You've done a good job of becoming very skilled at that because you probably have reduced the highest levels of uncertainty, and now you can actually have a life which is somewhat stable or within your control or your experience of having control.
I'm a control freak in a sense. Yes, I am.
I've got two more questions.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, what is spirituality? How would you describe spirituality for you? How do you practice that?
Many years back, I was actually quite involved in the church. I'm a Catholic and my whole family is Catholic. 3 generations or 4 generations. I had this conversation with a couple of priests. My question is this, okay, that we pray and we exalt God as the Almighty, the omnipresent. Then I said, could it have been possible that God came down, spoke to 8 people, and 8 people had a different reflection of what God was, and 8 of them actually went on to practice God in their own way. It actually became 8 different religions today. And of course, the priest looked at me and one of them actually started telling me, no, that's wrong. That's not the doctrine. I know that. Another one looked at me and both of them are still alive. I'm not going to mention their names because they are now no longer just priests. They are higher ups. They have changed from Reverend Father to something else. So they are somebody. One of them actually sat me down and had a very meaningful, almost 2-hour discussion on that. And he actually agreed that maybe God is so almighty that he could have done that. Personally, in terms of spirituality, to me, there are 2 definitions to spirituality. One is religion-based, and the other one is really about state of mind. So I believe first and foremost for religions that all good religions are actually a reflection of the same God. We have a different interpretation. And we know the Bible at the day of Pentecost, Holy Spirit came down, everyone spoke in tongues. That could have happened. Why can't my theory could have happened too? So that's what I believe in. Because if you look carefully at all the religions, it all happened around about the same time, around about the same region, and all talking about fundamentally the same way of life, way of behavior. So my concept of religion is actually a control of behavior, which then comes to the second part of a state of mind. I believe spirituality to me is about you and the concept of what is life after death, if there is one. And what are you going to do about it now? That to me is my definition of spirituality. It is an investment into the unknown. And the beauty of this is whatever you invest in materially ain't gonna be able to be cashed out in the unknown world. I believe that the unknown world is actually future generations of how you have shaped your family, how you have shaped society, how you shape your own ecosystem or your social circles or your community. That leaves a lasting legacy of doing good. I think the legacy of not who you are, what you've done, but what you've started so that it continues this whole doing good. I think that investment goes into the unknown. And the unknown is not a state of death, but a state of other people's lives in the future.
So it's like the impact that you leave with the future generations.
Correct. And so my thinking and what drives me every day is I have only one daughter. What will my daughter and my good friends, close friends, supposedly say in my eulogy? Bobby. But because at that moment I'm dead, I'm kind of halfway through the furnace, not really in the furnace yet, but I can't do anything to you. I can't give you $1. I can't give you a cent. My will is written already. I can't do squat about it. Yep. What are you going to say about me? I think that with no repercussions, no consequences, that to me is spirituality.
Actually, Kevin, it resonates with what I relate to as spirituality as well. And you've sort of made it so easy for people to understand it in terms of a day-to-day living experience versus there is this thing that you have to do, whether it's a ritual or whether it is a practice. But if I was living life on a day-to-day, moment by moment, and then I had that enduring thought about how should I shape these actions, because there is a possible impact out there with people and the environment and the world, then now I become conscious about that thought. I become conscious about the action, and I become conscious about the result.
This is the way we look at. Look at when we're young. I know we're still young, of course, but when we were younger, we can't wait to get older. We can't wait to be an adult. We can't wait that if only I can have achieved this. This perception of time becomes very slow. But as you go older, once you get past the middle point of 40, 45, it's almost halfway point. When you get older, time kind of gets faster. That was one context. The other context is when we were young, when we did things, you didn't know what happened. So you're doing things and then the result comes, you say, so how do I reach this result? But as you're older, the perspective of what we do kind of is in some form of slow motion. The time taken to do the thing is the same, but you kind of can see what is going to happen next. Although our sense of time is faster, but the way we do things, our perception of time becomes slower. That is that state which I think is very interesting, the concept of time. So I think as we get older, we need to slow down and really to reflect about not just myself, but the people around us. I mean, I'm not the Singapore government's best friend, okay, in a sense. I criticize, I comment, I come up with suggestions. Sometimes I'm in a position to do so, not because I'm in opposition, not because I'm a radical, but because I love my country. I think that's important. And people say, you've got so many comments about government. What are you doing about it? So in my little circle of Singapore attractions and tourism, I try to practice and influence what I think should be done. Not that I'm against the government, but I think this is something I should practice what I preach and not go around bitching about it. And that's the problem with Singaporeans. We bitch too much. Do something about it.
And we don't walk the talk.
And we're always saying some other country is doing better than us, especially in this COVID times, all kinds of stuff. I say, now then put yourself in the shoe of the minister to have to make that decision. It is not an easy decision.
On hindsight, we can all talk about it. But in that moment, to make a decision into reality, because you don't know what that future outcome is going to be, it takes courage.
That is an entrepreneurial spirit. That is an entrepreneurial spirit, but the priorities are different now. And as an entrepreneur, you're doing it for yourself. As a politician, the risk-taking is the greater good. And the greater good is not about satisfying 100%. It's about satisfying 51% or more. If the majority is okay, it's okay. And sometimes it's not about being okay. It's about doing the right thing.
I get that's a new perspective for me. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's like how Lee Kuan Yew and the first generation of leaders, I don't think they won a popularity contest. They had to build an economy and survival. Whether it was Goh Keng Swee, Toh Chin Chai, Rajaratnam, or Lee Kuan Yew himself, E.W. Barker, Hon Sui Sen, they made really difficult decisions, and it was not a popularity contest.
And that's what you have to do to be above it being just about you and your popularity or your party's survival.
No, it's a people's survival.
On this note, I want to switch a little bit to looking at, if you had 3 words to describe what is thriving, how would you describe it?
I don't think thriving is a state. Okay, the word thriving actually comes from doing well, right? Or being superlative. I don't believe in that, because I think it is 3 levels of society and people. One is about, like I said, surviving. Second state is critical mass, being in a state of tipping point. The third is a state of takeoff. Yes. Why? Because if you look again at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to many people, and I hope that Singaporeans and people who are listening to this podcast, and the fact that you're listening to a podcast, I believe you're not in that first state of surviving. I think you are at a state of at least that critical mass or tipping point. But we need to realize that there are many people who have been worse off than us, who are really worse than living from hand to mouth. At that state, at that level, thriving is really about surviving, isn't it? Then comes people like most of us are in that state of critical mass or tipping point. We are kind of contented, but we want more, okay? But we don't know, actually, we are already in a state of doing okay. So our definition of thriving is not about food on the table, but the what if I had more? How can I get more? Then the third state is the takeoff. People like Elon Musk, they're already flying and soaring. To us, one step behind them, the people in the critical mass state will look at people like Elon Musk like saying, you're more than thriving. You are flying. You're soaring through the skies. But his state of mind is, I'm not there yet. I want to build something in space. So the concept of thriving has one, the context of the present and the what if, and what does he have that I don't have. So I think that the term thriving is really subjective, depending on what socio-economic status and circumstances you're at. I don't know whether I've given you the 3 words.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing with us your thoughts around thriving. And it's been a really insightful interview, Kevin. Thank you for your generous sharing throughout the session.